Thank you, Carol, for that introduction. I don't run anymore, unfortunately. I ride my bike a lot and swim. Can't hear me? Okay. I'll talk into the mic a bit louder. Sorry. I've never been accused of not being heard. Yeah, I had a cartilage injury, and you can't grow those back. But I continue to exercise, and you'll see from my presentation why it's so important. These are difficult talks for scientists to give, but they're the most important talks that scientists give because we are actually servants to taxpayers because we're reliant upon donations and taxpayers' money through the National Health and Medical Research Council. So you're far more important for me to talk to than anyone else. So I'm going to talk to you today. You've heard a lot about what a difficult disease this is to both treat and also to diagnose, etc. But if we were to have physical activity and we were to prevent obesity, at least for type 2 diabetes, we'd pretty much eradicate the disease. So this is a bit of doom and gloom to begin with. This is relatively recent data, and this is the number of people with diabetes by region. And you can see that there are areas like the Western Pacific region and Southeast Asia where this is actually becoming a tsunami of disease. Now, there's a reason for this, and it's linked to the genetics of people in these areas. And just to give you an example for sort of why it's such a prevalent disease in the Western Pacific area is because this was Darwinian survival. So people were self-selected to store energy because when they moved from island to island, they had to endure weeks of famine. So the only ones that survived were the ones that genetically were predisposed to store energy. Well, now that in these regions food is plentiful, it's become a big problem. And it's a problem all over the world, but it's starting to emerge in cultures where people aren't used to having plenty as we have in the Western world. Now, there's a reason why diabetes is getting worse, and this week, it's National Diabetes Week. Poor diet, which is something I think that Decorah will talk to you about. This is something I'm going to talk about, and this is the focus of my lab, and that is sedentary lifestyle. And of course, we're living longer. So it's an age-related disorder. This is type 2 diabetes. And you can see here that the projection is not good, that we're currently at about 380 million people, but it's projected to be 600 million by 2035, which is a staggering increase in percentage. Now, the good news is if people are active, we can prevent this. And this is just a graph of exercise and risk of diabetes. Sorry for the blurriness. I don't know why it's like that. But if you do some exercise per week, your relative risk is halved. So clearly exercise is important. And how important is really, this was a landmark paper published by the Diabetes Prevention Research Group in the best clinical journal in the world. And this is very easy for us to understand. Metformin is the frontline drug to treat diabetes. So you can see here that if you implement a healthy lifestyle, it reduces the cumulative incidence of diabetes better than the frontline drug that we already have. Now, this is telling us two things: that the frontline drug we currently have is not very effective, and secondly, that we aren't doing enough exercise. And we want, in our lab, we strive to give definitive proof as to why exercise is important, and we look at this at a molecular level to come up with drugs that can mimic exercise. Now, nothing is going to be able to mimic exercise perfectly. I mean, it has social benefits, it has cognitive benefits, and it has benefits against non-communicable diseases. But there are some people who simply can't exercise. And so for those people, we try and design what we call exercise mimetics. Now, here are some of the benefits of exercise in people with type 2 diabetes. And some of the things that are important is that you decrease reliance on medications. And whatever we can tell you as medical researchers, there is no absolutely safe medication. There is always going to be some side effect, but medications are prescribed when the side effect is way less than the desired benefit. But if you can decrease your meds by exercising, this is a really good thing. Lipoprotein or fat profile in the blood is related to cardiovascular disease. Many people don't die of diabetes. They die of complications, and one of the complications is a cardiovascular event. So exercise is very good for this, and this is interlinked. Now, here's just some hard evidence to show that exercise, this is American data, but this is showing the exercise habits of patients with diabetes. And what you can see here is that if you do not exercise at least 30 minutes a day at all in the previous week, 15% of those people have diabetes. But if you exercise at least 30 minutes 4 to 6 times in the previous week, in all Americans this was 8%. So it's almost halved. Okay? And if you can look at non-obese adults, this is the same trend, and it's not as good in obese adults with diabetes, but certainly it's still beneficial. So simply by exercising, you decrease the incidence of diabetes. And this paper came out last year, and it's actually quite scary because low physical capacity is second only to smoking as the highest death risk now. And a paper actually was published in Nature, one of the most reputable journals 2 days ago, where I didn't have time to put it in my presentation. I wanted to, but I would have got in trouble from the organisers because I would have had to have put it in at late notice because I only actually got the data yesterday. This paper showed that they did a global analysis of physical activity in the whole world. And their conclusion was the whole of humanity is not exercising enough. And it's going to lead to many, many diseases, and I'll show you right at the end that it's not just diabetes we're worried about. And if you think about the economic impact, we all are touched by this because the governments really are spending enormous amounts of money. And not to be critical of governments, but if they put more money into research and into prevention, it'll benefit in the long run. These are the change in GDP in millions, the economic impact of sedentary behaviour. And you can see that the economic impact around about now is $100 million. And look at the projection. This is really scary. This is a global health crisis. The lack of physical activity is a global health crisis, much as obesity is. Okay, so we all know, you don't need me to tell you, we all know why exercise is, we all know that exercise is good for us, but how do we really know? How does exercise help and why should we care? Well, this is interesting, an interesting graph that I want you to look at very clearly. And I think that females are a little bit more perceptive to hard evidence than males, and I'll show you why in a moment. But males are also. You can see here, these are smoking rates. And what you can see very clearly from these graphs, both in male and female smoking prevalence, but much more in females, you can see this is a line, that at this point here, smoking rates plummeted. And the reason why they did was because at this point, the Surgeon General of the US released the first report that suggested smoking caused cancer. So this was evidence. So it was suspected through these years that smoking caused cancer, and people said smoking is bad for you, but people continued to smoke until there was clear evidence that smoking caused cancer. Now, we're striving in our lab to provide that evidence that exercise is good. So people need hard evidence to invoke behaviour change. That's very clear from this graph. So this is what we do in my lab. This is Martin Whittam, one of the talented people in my laboratory. And we look at a cluster of diseases, and we look at inactivity and its effect on these diseases and increased risk, and physical activity and how it decreases all of these clusters of what we call metabolic diseases. So our goal in our lab is that exercise is a preventative treatment for non-contagious diseases, and we aim to characterise the therapeutic potential of muscle-secreted proteins. So we believe that the muscle releases factors during exercise that then have all this positive benefit on other parts of the body. And I'll show you two little vignettes about that. And we coin the term myokines, and my lab is fairly well renowned for this discovery. So this is just some of the ways that we do this. I won't get into this, but we actually do very distinct what's called transcriptomic. So we look at the RNA level of genes encoding proteins and the proteins themselves to identify things that come out of the muscle that could be of benefit. And this is the concept, that the myokines will release proteins, the muscle will release myokines, and these will block an increase in adiposity and prevent diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and osteoporosis. And that's what we're trying to work on in the lab. Now, this is not a new concept. This gentleman, Goldstein, suggested this even before I was born, that there is a humoral component of muscular exercise. So this is not a new concept, but after he made this hypothesis, nobody looked at it. Nobody looked at it until we did, and this was in the late 90s, so somewhat nearly 40 years later. And we thought that muscle might secrete proteins because there's what's called a cytokine, and it's called interleukin 6, and it goes up when you have an infection, when you have sepsis. But it seems to go up in response to another cytokine called TNF. And these cytokines come from immune cells. But during exercise, TNF does not go up at all, and IL-6 does. So it's a very different pattern. And IL-6 can't be that bad if it goes up during exercise. And everyone thought it was bad because it went up during sepsis. But this is the real bad guy, this guy here. And this doesn't go up during exercise. So we spent about 10 years trying to work out where this was coming from, and we found out it came from a contracting muscle. Now, this is a little bit gory after morning tea, but what we do here is we can put a catheter into a vein in a leg and into an artery in a leg, and the person can exercise, and by sampling blood from the vein and from the artery, we can look at the differences in the concentration of proteins. And if the protein is lower if the protein is higher in the vein than the artery, it means that the contracting leg is releasing that protein, and that's exactly what we saw with IL-6, that it was coming from contracting leg. And we went on to show, using more sophisticated techniques, these are muscle cells, and you can see very clearly that the IL-6 is coming from the muscle cells. And this was a very quite big discovery from our lab. Now, I'm going to fast forward 15 years, and this is where we're at the moment. This is IL-6. This is the structure of the protein that I just showed you. And this is another and this could never be used as a therapy for reasons I won't get into, but this is another protein called CNTF. And what we did, this is Tamara, a postdoc, and my collaborator from Germany, Stefan. We took this bit off CNTF, we took this bit off IL-6, and we pasted this bit onto the rest of that protein. And as you can see here, we made a new cytokine called IC7. And it's a drug that mimics the effect of exercise, and it's about to go into a phase 1 clinical trial if we can raise 5 million venture capital. And we're in the process of doing this. We've just incorporated a new company, but this could be, we think, a blockbuster new drug. And the reason why we think it works is because it does the same thing pretty much as this, which comes from your leg during exercise. So that's just one example where we can interrogate the biology of exercise and come up with exercise mimetics. We're very excited about this work, and it's just about to be submitted to a very prestigious journal at the end of this week, actually. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is it's not just diabetes that exercise is really good for. The other thing, it's very, very good in preventing cancer. And you can see here that here is a figure showing a number of studies, and these are case-controlled studies on recreational physical activity and breast cancer. And you can see in all of these studies that if you increase exercise, you decrease your relative risk of developing breast cancer. And we're very excited about this work because we think we've got the molecular link. Now, there's convincing and probable evidence that colon cancer, breast and endometrial cancer, that exercise in humans can decrease your risk of these cancers. So we, Martin, did an experiment which I won't get into, but we can identify literally thousands of proteins released from the muscles in what are called exosomes, which you don't need to know about. But we can now look at the whole exercise-induced proteome in these small microvesicles that are in blood. And when we did a screen, we identified a protein called Decorah. And this was the sixth highest hit in our screen. And why was this important to us? Well, because earlier this millennium, a group had published that there is an anti-metastatic role of Decorah in breast cancer. So here we thought we had evidence that a protein that is produced by your muscles when you exercise can be anti-metastatic in breast cancer. And this is just the number of, they did this in animal studies and they overexpressed this in the tumour. And when they did this, it metastasised less. So physical activity is known, as I said, to be positive for breast cancer. What if what's mitigating this effect is Decorah? So the first thing we did is we did our AV balance studies in humans, and we were able to show very clearly that Decorah is in fact a myokine. It goes up with exercise and then back down with rest. And you can see that very clearly in these studies. These are just normal exercising humans. So it is released from your leg. I won't show you data from a study we've done in women with breast cancer, but it also goes up in their blood. Now, these are two very talented scientists in the cancer division, and what they were able to show is that the part of the tumour that's very important for preventing metastases is called the extracellular matrix. And they were able to show that this protein is much lower expressed in the extracellular matrix of tumours than normal tissue. And then we went to, these are very compelling data. This is, we collaborated with a colleague in the Breast Cancer Network Consortium in Queensland, and we analysed thousands of samples from women with breast cancer. And you can see very clearly here that if their tumours expressed Decorah, their relapse-free survival time was increased, and their distant metastases-free survival time was also increased. So we're very excited because what we think is happening, and we're currently doing these projects, is that the Decorah is being released from your muscles when you exercise. And if you're a female who has breast cancer, if you can get that Decorah into the tumour, you'll prevent it from metastasising and it may save your life. So we're proving this by doing a lot of animal experiments and some human experiments to see if women who have breast cancer, who are exercising, if there is a greater expression of Decorah in their tumours when they have surgery. So this is something that just shows you all of the proteins that have been identified coming from your muscles when you exercise. You can see that they all have positive effects, and it's led to a very fertile area of research. So with that, I'm going to finish and thank the people who did the work. All of these people are in my lab currently at the Garvan. I was in Melbourne until 2.5 years ago, and my lab had an amicable divorce, and I left 4 of them in Melbourne. And this is the group in Sydney, and this is the group in Melbourne. And thank you for your attention.